Right, so the magic money tree has put in a magical new appearance, it would seem, as Keir Starmer has announced he will be increasing defence spending and continues to back Britain's nuclear deterrent. All after having spent an interminable amount of time, it seems, telling us that we cannot afford this and cannot afford that, all in the name of sticking to fiscal rules that neither really exist, except in the fevered red Tory brain of ex-banker Rachel Reeves, nor actually make any economic sense. Where Starmer has said, no, we can't afford to deal with child poverty, and no, we can't afford to have infrastructure like schools and hospitals maintained and properly funded, no way out of the continued Tory austerity under his Labour if they form the next government. He can, it appears, find the money to go on a global willy waving contest over nuclear weapons. This is peak small man syndrome, and the country will suffer just so he can massage his own ego and act like a big man on the world stage and brag about pushing that big red button to appease the equally red faces of the nation's Gammons. Right, so the biggest question people have been asking about Labour under Keir Starmer for years now has been, what do you stand for? Well, he's flip-flopped and changed his mind, hasn't he? And he's come up with pledge after promise after mission after vow after commitment and not stuck for the vast majority of it, save for his support for Israel. He is politically adulterous, I think that's a good description, isn't it? But this has been a question asked more and more of his Labour, having repeatedly ruled out investing in the stuff that matters to us, the stuff that people need. And his basis for that has been we can't afford it, blaming the Tories for their spending, just as the Tories blamed the previous Labour government for their spending. And all that really happens is everything gets worse, stuff stops working, yet it all becomes vastly more expensive for us when our bills come through the door. Saying Labour must now be more responsible, and he's pointing out to how his Labour are going to be that, with Rachel Reeves and her fiscal rules, which are complete nonsense and actually don't mean a damn thing. Following World War II, when this country was in ruins, and the national debt was sky high because we'd had a war to pay for, the government of Attlee that came in didn't say we can't fix anything like that, we're going to have to live amongst the ruins, because there was a mass infrastructure programme to build housing and hospitals and schools. The NHS got created. Social Security was created. And actually, this country was made one that we could all be proud of. We're in nowhere near the same state as a country as we were then. But you'd think we were in a far worse state listening to Reeves, because let's face it, when it comes to day-to-day running of the country's decisions, she's the one that's going to be in charge, not Starmer. He's economically out of his depth in a bird bath, let alone as PM, and that, I fear, is something that will become readily more and more apparent once he walks through the doors of number 10, as he seems inevitable to do. But where Reeves and Starmer have decided they can't afford to end the cruel, impoverishing two-child benefit cap, cannot invest in the NHS, preferring more privatisation in it, cannot invest in education, cannot seemingly invest in anything at all, yet still think they can deliver growth, of course. The one thing they do seem to think is still worth investing in are nuclear weapons. Kids can starve, we need nukes. All his words of no uncosted commitments, and they are out the window the moment the Daily Fail come a-calling when it's time to appeal to their audience, which amounts to people much like this bunch who can forget this, the wall of gammon, the voters Starmer wants, not caring about the rest of us whose votes he's lost and are continuing to lose on a daily basis. Well, I suppose if you were as drunk on national polling figures as Labour are, I suppose you might think similarly too. We'll see if they're anything close to being correct at some point soon enough, because I bet they're going to be very wrong myself. Anyway, at a time when Labour can't seem to decide what they are actually for, even as close as we are to a general election, now Starmer has written for the Daily Fail in a piece entitled Keir Starmer, my commitment to the UK's nuclear deterrent is unshakable, absolute, total, which are three words which would accurately describe the fallout should nuclear weapons ever actually be used, and also prefix the word failure quite nicely, which is what I fully expect his administration to be as far as all of us are concerned. No uncosted spending. Everything must follow the fiscal rules we're setting ourselves, they say, but no more money to spaff on weapons of mass destruction we can never use. Sure, no problem with that. I'll open the checkbook. Here's a blank check. Whilst this might get middle-aged, crimson-faced white men of a certain political persuasion reaching for their angina pills and excitement, for those of us with any critical sense, This just goes to prove those fiscal rules and the economic responsibilities Labour are tying themselves in knots over to explain are evidently just a load of hot air. If we cannot afford basics to look after the population, the priority of any government, as that should be, Starmer should be making the argument against nukes, not for them. Clearly they are unaffordable, as would be the increase in defence spending to 2.5% of GDP along with that. In other words, there's no money to deal with poverty or national infrastructure because it's being siphoned off to pay for the toys of war instead. Sorry, but I'm not interested in a party with such an abominably skewed sense of priorities. There's another aspect to all of this, though, and that is the need to invest more in actual usable defence resources, equipment for more conventional defence, as it were. Because nobody here is saying we shouldn't invest in defence, but it should be effective, both in terms of cost and efficacy, and Trident is neither. It was only this February gone that Trident was tested, and for the second time in 8 years, it failed. It'll be fine on the day is a message that came out from Grant Shapps at the time, but I'm not reassured by that. I don't feel protected by this. It's of course the message that the government will convey because they want us to believe this nuclear deterrent of ours is effective, especially given how much it costs. But when it seems more likely to fizzle and go plop in the sea once the proverbial fuse is lit, with less bang than a Tesco value firework, though the implication it goes plop on our doorstep and then explodes is a much more disconcerting thought. So we have a defence deterrent that is on hand useless, as proven by testing, and is also, in the opinion of the armed forces, with the exception of the Navy, because it's theirs, is ridiculously expensive, and money which would be better used in conventional defence, and actually benefits society because Trident is a big black hole that millions and millions of pounds disappears into, that offers absolutely no return whatsoever, save as a threat to other nations, and not much of one though, when the nations being warned off like Russia have a great many more of them than we do, and I dare say they probably work as well. The one other aspect I've not mentioned here regarding Trident is that without US sign-off we can't use them anyway, as they have responsibility for all of the coding. Also, whilst thinking about the matter of cost as well, how much is too much, or is there actually an open checkbook here, a magic money tree prepared to be shaken to death, dragged up by its roots if needs be? Where are the fiscal rules being applied to Trident? And if they're not, why are they not being applied to this when they're being applied to everything else as an excuse to not spend money? Investment in nukes is vanity. It is not productive. It protects nobody. I'd argue they make you a bigger target because you have them. That is how I feel about such things. But apparently that means I don't back Britain, in which case. I don't back war, actually, Keith. And I don't need to stick a load of Union flags up my jacksie like you seem to have to prove my patriotism either. End child poverty, end homelessness, take a lead on climate change and green technology. Give me something to be proud of Britain for, because backing nuclear weapons isn't going to be it. Besides, if we're going to talk about who backs Britain, why are you so beholden to the Israel lobby for a start? Why does Labour Friends of Israel have so much clout? Where's your patriotism when it comes to them and Israel? Anyway, let's not slide back into that argument on this video. There's plenty of others covering that argument. But the fact of the matter is nuclear weapons don't support peace and don't lead to a peaceful planet. They just keep the whole world in a perpetual state of terror, which implies having them and campaigning for more of them, or renewal of old systems, is simply terrorism by association. I've no issue with defence spending, aside from the nukes. But as part of a realistic plan for the country that includes investment that is badly needed after 14 years of Tory misrule. It can't be either or when you're stripping away funding that will make a huge difference in the lives, everyday lives of millions of ordinary working class people, in favour of something that just keeps the world on the edge of annihilation. And for what purpose? A few Tory votes going over to you? A few more by jumping up and down with the stupidest question the media ever gets asked, when they ask you, will you press the red button? To which Starmer obviously answers yes, because he's just as mad as every other warmongering Prime Minister that's come before him. Starmer is the least deserving virtually nail on cert to be the next Prime Minister. He really is the luckiest man in politics. When reality bites that he's no different to the government we're voting on, or voting out, his luck is going to run out very, very quickly, I fancy. There will be hell on, and those nukes will remain just as useless then as they do now. This all might appeal to Daily Fail readers. Clearly Starmer thinks it will, otherwise he wouldn't have written this column in that rag. It doesn't appeal to those you already had, voters who were hanging on, And members and Labour supporters do seem to be deserting Labour in no small numbers. Starmer and his right-wing hangers-on might not care about this. In fact, I know they don't care about this. But with significant numbers of younger voters, most of all seeming to be going elsewhere, the same generational decline the Tories are suffering from right now is coming for Labour next if they carry on like this. As this story here will explain all about as my video recommendation for you to watch next. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.